Picture this. December 16th, 1944, deep in the Ardennes forest where Belgium meets Germany. The trees stand frozen and silent under a blanket of fresh snow. Everything looks peaceful, almost like a Christmas card. American soldiers huddle in their foxholes, stamping their feet to keep the blood moving, sharing quiet jokes, scribbling letters to sweethearts and mothers back home. Most of them are just kids, really 18 or 19 years old, and they honestly believe the worst is behind them. Germany is crumbling. Everyone says Berlin will fall any day now. Christmas is just around the corner. They can almost taste it. But at exactly 5:30 that morning, the entire world explodes. The silence shatters as hundreds of German artillery pieces open fire all at once, turning the peaceful winter forest into an erupting nightmare of fire and steel. Trees blow apart into deadly splinters. Snow turns black with smoke and blood. Men scream as their foxholes collapse on top of them. This is it. This is the moment Hitler has been planning for months. The Battle of the Bulge has begun, and almost nobody saw it coming. For weeks, German propaganda has been calling American soldiers soft, inexperienced, too dependent on machines instead of real fighting spirit. Hitler himself is convinced that one massive surprise attack, one perfectly executed punch, can split the Allied armies in half and force them to negotiate peace on his terms. The plan is audacious. Smash through the American front lines, race to the port of Antwerp, cut the Allied forces in two, and maybe, just maybe, turn the entire war around. But to pull this off, the Germans need three things: speed, precision, and total surprise. And right now, in the freezing pre-dawn darkness, they have all three. Thousands of German troops, including elite SS Panzer divisions and battle-hardened veterans fresh from the brutal Eastern Front, creep silently toward American positions. Most of the Americans defending this sector are either green replacements who just arrived or exhausted veterans resting after months of continuous fighting. They are spread impossibly thin along 80 miles of dense forest. Thin lines of freezing boys against an army of steel. When those first shells come screaming down, chaos erupts instantly. Entire American units simply vanish in the confusion. Some soldiers run. Some fight back desperately. Some freeze to death in their holes, too shocked to move. The 106th Infantry Division, caught right in the center of the German assault, gets completely surrounded within 24 hours. More than 6,000 American soldiers surrender in one of the largest capitulations in European theater history. German soldiers laugh and jeer as they march past long columns of captured GIs, hands on their heads, shivering violently in the bitter cold. To the Germans, this seems like proof that Hitler was right all along. The Americans are weak. They cannot stand up to real soldiers. But they are dead wrong, because not every American line breaks. In certain key positions like Bastogne, St. Vith, and Elsenborn Ridge, something remarkable begins to happen. The Germans have superior numbers, more tanks, and vastly more combat experience. But the Americans have something else. They have grit. They have stubborn pride. And they're about to prove that underestimating them is a fatal mistake. At the small Belgian town of Bastogne, situated at a critical road junction, the 101st Airborne Division gets rushed into position. These are the same paratroopers who jumped into Normandy on D-Day. They are ordered to hold Bastogne at all costs. No retreat. No surrender. They dig in as the snow gets heavier and the temperature plummets. They have no winter uniforms. Supply lines are cut. Air support cannot fly through the thick clouds. German tanks completely encircle the town. These men are trapped. The cold becomes almost unbearable. Every breath hurts your lungs. Ammunition runs low. Soldiers burn rifle oil in tin cans just to keep their fingers from freezing solid. And then on December 22nd, something almost theatrical happens. A German officer approaches under a white flag. He hands over a formal letter to the American lines. It is an ultimatum. Surrender now or face complete annihilation. The message gets passed up to Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, the acting commander of the 101st. He reads it, actually laughs out loud, and scribbles a single word on his reply, nuts. The German officers are genuinely confused. They ask their translators what this word means. An American colonel grins and tells them plainly, it means go to hell. That one word becomes legendary almost instantly. Back at German headquarters, frustration builds with every passing hour. Every delay costs them precious fuel and irreplaceable time. The narrow, icy roads become clogged with wrecked vehicles. Their tanks cannot maneuver through the tight forest passes. American combat engineers, often fighting literally to their last breath, blow up critical bridges just seconds before German panzers reach them. And then the weather, that same thick fog that gave the Germans their initial surprise, suddenly turns against them. When the skies finally clear on December 23rd, the Americans unleash their most devastating weapon, total air superiority. Thousands of American bombers and fighter planes fill the sky. Thunderbolts, Mustangs, and B-26 Marauders come screaming down on exposed German columns. Roads that were once supply lines become graveyards of burning tanks and shattered trucks. German soldiers dive into ditches as fire literally rains from above. In just 2 days of clear weather, the once proud Luftwaffe is effectively wiped out. The German Air Force can barely launch a handful of sorties. On the ground, German morale begins cracking. They have been promised an easy victory, another lightning-fast blitzkrieg like 1940. Instead, they face relentless American counterattacks, constant artillery bombardment, and snipers hiding in every shadow. At night, the sound of American tank engines echoes through the frozen trees, a clear sign that the Americans are regrouping and preparing to strike back. One German sergeant later writes in his diary, "We thought they would run. Instead, they kept coming, again and again, like the snow, endless." Then comes Patton. While the Germans are pushing north, General George S. Patton is already executing what many consider an impossible feat. He pivots his entire Third Army, 250,000 men with all their tanks and artillery, 90 degrees through ice and snow, to strike the Germans from the south. He does in 2 days what German commanders insisted could not be done in 2 weeks. On December 26th, Patton's lead tanks smash through the German encirclement. The paratroopers of the 101st, exhausted and starving and frozen nearly to death, greet them with weak smiles and quiet nods. They never surrendered. They never ran. They held Bastogne. And now the tide of battle turns completely. By New Year's Eve, Hitler's grand final offensive is collapsing. The mighty panzer divisions run out of fuel. Crews abandon their tanks, leaving them silent and frozen in the snow like metal tombstones. The Americans push forward relentlessly now. Infantry, tanks, artillery, and planes, turning desperate defense into calculated revenge. In those same frozen forests where German soldiers had laughed at captured Americans just weeks before, now lie the wrecks of German ambition. Prisoners pour in by the thousands. Elite SS troops, Wehrmacht veterans, all of them stunned by what they faced. One of them says quietly to his captors, "We thought you were amateurs, but you fight like demons." When it finally ends, the cost is staggering. 19,000 Americans are dead, tens of thousands more wounded or missing. It is the bloodiest battle the United States Army has ever fought. But they stopped the Germans cold. They destroyed the last major offensive of the Third Reich. And they proved to the world, and more importantly to themselves, that no army on earth could break their will. The Battle of the Bulge changes everything. Even a German high command realizes it. Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, admits privately that the Americans have become a formidable and terrible opponent. From this point forward, the Wehrmacht fights only to survive, not to win. And across the front lines, those same American soldiers who had once been dismissed as soft and inexperienced march forward with a quiet, hardened pride. They do not call themselves heroes. They simply did their duty. Through snow, through fear, through the worst winter in living memory. They never stopped moving forward. When the war finally ends in May 1945, reporters asked General Eisenhower how the Americans survived the Ardennes. He says simply, they were tough. They were trained. But above all, they believed in what they were fighting for. And that belief, that unshakable strength of purpose, is what the Germans never understood. They thought the Americans were weak. They thought they would break under pressure. They thought that tanks and terror could crush a democracy. But in the winter of 1944, on the frozen fields of Belgium, they learned a truth written in blood and courage. The American soldier might bend under impossible weight, but he never breaks. Freedom, as Patton once said, is not free, but it remains the one thing most worth paying for. And the men of Bastogne, of Elsenborn Ridge, of every snow-covered foxhole scattered through the Ardennes, they paid that price in full. They paid it so that one day the world would remember not the weakness their enemy expected, but the strength that nobody saw coming.